In a quiet Wall Street office, a single piece of paper slid across a polished table. On it was a number so large it would make one man the richest in the world and, in doing so, end his career. Andrew Carnegie had just sold his steel empire to J.P. Morgan. The price he jotted down was a staggering $480 million. That figure representing over 2% of the entire U.S. GDP at the time was a fortune almost beyond comprehension, the culmination of a life that began in utter poverty. But for Carnegie, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his real mission. He had built an empire of steel, but his true legacy would be built on an idea that was, at the time, unheard of: to give every single dollar away. This is the story of not just how the Carnegie family amassed a fortune that dwarfed kings, but how they embarked on a mission to erase it, and in the process, reshaped what charity and education mean to the modern world. The story begins not in a boardroom, but in a tiny weaver's cottage in Dunfermline, Scotland. Born in 1835, Andrew Carnegie entered a world on the brink of chaos. His father, William, was a master handloom weaver, a respected artisan in a proud trade. The Carnegie family, including his mother Margaret, were steeped in radical politics. They believed in workers' rights, self-education, and activism. His uncle had even been locked up for his role in a labor strike, an event that left a deep mark on young Andrew. But that world of skilled craftsmanship and fierce independence was about to be obliterated. The Industrial Revolution rolled into Dunfermline not as a promise, but as a threat. Steam-powered looms flooded the new factories, making the handloom obsolete overnight. William Carnegie, a man who once owned several looms himself, was suddenly a relic. Because of the family's reputation as activists, finding factory work was nearly impossible. Andrew would later write about the shame he felt watching his father beg for work. It was a feeling burnt into my heart, forging a resolve that one day he would conquer the poverty that haunted his family. Facing starvation, his mother Margaret made the call. In 1848, after selling their last possessions and borrowing money for the trip, the Carnegie family set sail for America. Andrew was 13 years old. Their destination was Allegheny, Pennsylvania, a dirty, soot-stained industrial town across the river from Pittsburgh. They moved into a flimsy house in a neighborhood people mockingly called Slab Town. The American dream felt very far away. To help his family survive, Andrew immediately went to work. His first job was as a bobbin boy in a cotton mill, working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, for a meager $1.20 a week. He would run spools of thread to the weavers, a grueling, mind-numbing task for a boy his age. He later took a job firing a boiler in a factory cellar, a job so overwhelming he often had to hide his tears. But even in that darkness, a flicker of ambition burned, and it was about to be fueled by an unexpected gift. In Allegheny, a retired businessman named Colonel James Anderson opened his personal library of 400 books to the local working boys, letting them borrow a new book every Saturday. For Carnegie, this was more than a kindness. It was a lifeline. He devoured the book, spending every spare moment he could steal from his long work hours lost in their pages. As he famously put it, "The windows were opened in the walls of my dungeon through which the light of knowledge streamed in." Colonel Anderson's generosity planted a seed. Carnegie vowed that if he ever got rich, he would make sure other poor boys had the same access to the tools of self-improvement. It was a promise that would one day change the face of public education forever. Carnegie's relentless drive didn't go unnoticed. In 1849, he landed a job as a telegraph messenger boy. He became obsessed memorizing Pittsburgh streets and the faces of its important businessmen to make his deliveries faster. But he didn't just deliver messages. He studied the machine that sent them. He taught himself to read the telegraph's clicks by ear, a rare skill that quickly got him promoted to operator. This new job put him at the nerve center of American industry, and it was there that he caught the eye of Thomas A. Scott, a superintendent of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Scott was a titan of the booming railroad industry, and he saw a reflection of his own ambition in the young operator. In 1853, he hired Carnegie as his personal secretary and telegrapher for $35 a month. "I couldn't imagine," Carnegie later said, "what I could ever do with so much money." Working as Scott's right-hand man was the ultimate education in business. The railroads were America's first truly massive companies, and Carnegie had a front-row seat to their explosive growth. More importantly, he got access to insider information, and that access soon led to an opportunity that would change his life forever. In 1856, Scott tipped Carnegie off to a chance to buy 10 shares in the Adams Express Company for $600. It was a fortune Carnegie didn't have, but his mother, Margaret, ever the driving force, mortgaged their family home to get the loan. Soon after, a check for $10 arrived, his first dividend. Carnegie described the moment as an epiphany. Eureka! Here's the goose that lays the golden eggs. For the first time, he truly understood the power of capital, that money could work for you, earning more money without the backbreaking labor that had defined his entire life. From that moment on, Carnegie became a relentless investor. While still working for the railroad, he used his dividends and small loans to buy into companies that supported the industry he knew best. An investment of just over $200 in a new sleeping car company soon paid him $5,000 a year, more than 3 times his railroad salary. He poured that money into Pennsylvania's booming oil fields, and one of those investments brought in over $17,000 in a single year. By 1863, at just 29 years old, Carnegie was earning nearly $50,000 a year, the modern equivalent of millions. He owned stakes in ironworks, locomotive factories, and bridge companies, all connected to the Pennsylvania Railroad. His mentor, Thomas Scott, and other railroad execs often got stock in Carnegie's ventures, creating a powerful network of profit. When the Civil War broke out, Carnegie helped Scott manage military rail transport for the Union, deepening his connections and his understanding of logistics. In 1865, his fortune secure, Carnegie left the railroad to run his own business, the Keystone Bridge Company, which aimed to replace the nation's wooden bridges with stronger ones made of iron. The penniless immigrant boy was now a wealthy man, but his empire was just getting started. While his early investments made him rich, it was a trip to Britain in the early 1870s that showed him the path to becoming a true titan. There, Carnegie witnessed the Bessemer process, a revolutionary way to turn brittle iron into strong, flexible steel on a massive scale. Invented by Henry Bessemer, the process made mass-produced steel cheap, a material far better than iron for rails, buildings, and bridges. Carnegie immediately grasped its world-changing potential. When he returned to Pittsburgh, he threw himself into steel with a singular, ferocious focus. In 1875, he opened his first massive steel mill, the J. Edgar Thomson Steel Works, pointedly named after the president of his old employer, the Pennsylvania Railroad. While other American industrialists were slow to adopt the expensive new Bessemer technology, Carnegie went all in. But technology was only half the plan. The other half was a relentless obsession with cost, a system he called hard driving. He constantly reinvested his profits into the latest equipment, ruthlessly tearing out machinery that was even slightly outdated. He tracked costs down to the penny and pitted his mill foremen against each other in fierce competition. His mantra was simple: watch the costs, and the profits will take care of themselves. His real masterstroke, though, was something called vertical integration. Carnegie figured that to truly control costs, he had to control every single step of making steel. So he started buying the entire supply chain. He acquired iron ore mines in Minnesota, bought a fleet of ships to transport the ore across the Great Lakes, and built his own railroad to haul it from the docks to his mills. He bought the coal fields that produced the coke to fire his furnaces. From the raw ore in the ground to the finished steel beam leaving the factory, it all belonged to Carnegie. This system gave him an unbeatable edge. While his competitors had to deal with fluctuating prices for materials and transport, Carnegie's costs were fixed and low. He could undercut any rival, either driving them out of business or forcing them to sell out to him. In 1883, he bought his biggest competitor, the Homestead Steel Works. By 1892, he combined all his companies into the Carnegie Steel Company. By the turn of the century, Carnegie Steel was the largest and most profitable industrial enterprise on the planet. It produced more steel than all of Great Britain combined. Andrew Carnegie, the bobbin boy who once earned $1 a week, now commanded an empire the world had never seen. By the dawn of the 20th century, Andrew Carnegie was 65 and thinking about retirement. For years, he'd been saying that a rich man's life should have two halves: the first for making money and the second for giving it away. He'd built his empire. Now he was itching to start his second act. The only problem was how to cash out of the colossal machine he had created. The answer had a name: John Pierpont Morgan, the most powerful banker in America. J.P. Morgan had a grand vision to merge the American steel industry into a single massive corporation that would dominate the global market. The centerpiece of that vision, the one company he absolutely had to have, was Carnegie Steel. In late 1900, at a dinner party, Carnegie let it be known that he might be willing to sell. The message was delivered. Soon after, Morgan sent Charles M. Schwab, the president of Carnegie Steel, to feel out the old Scotsman. The two met for a game of golf, and Carnegie, on a single sheet of paper, wrote down his price: $480 million. The figure was astronomical, worth over $17 billion today, but representing a much larger share of the economy back then. Schwab took the note to Morgan. The banker glanced at it and, without hesitating, said, "I accept this price." The deal was sealed with a simple handshake on March 2, 1901. The sale created the United States Steel Corporation, the world's first billion-dollar company, and it made Andrew Carnegie the richest man on the planet, temporarily surpassing even John D. Rockefeller. Carnegie's personal take was about $225 million in gold bonds, with the rest going to his partners. The fortune was so vast that a special vault had to be built just to hold the bonds. When the deal was done, Carnegie reportedly told Morgan, "I am to be congratulated on getting out of business." Morgan replied, "I am to be congratulated on getting into it." For Carnegie, the sale wasn't a business victory, it was liberation. He had completed the first phase of his life's plan. Now, with a fortune that defied imagination, he could finally turn to what he saw as his true life's work: the immense challenge of giving it all away. But the shining legacy of Andrew Carnegie is forever shadowed by the dark events of one bloody summer. To understand the philanthropist, you have to confront the ruthless capitalist. And nowhere is that conflict clearer than in the Homestead Strike of 1892. The Homestead Steel Works was one of the jewels of Carnegie's empire, a massive modern plant with thousands of skilled workers represented by one of the country's most powerful unions. As Carnegie's obsession with cutting costs intensified, a clash became inevitable. Carnegie, who had once written in favor of labor rights, now saw the union as just one more obstacle to efficiency. In 1892, as the union's contract came up for renewal, Carnegie and his chairman, Henry Clay Frick, were determined to break it for good. Frick was a notoriously anti-union industrialist, a man Carnegie knew would use brutal tactics. While Carnegie conveniently left for his annual vacation to a remote castle in Scotland, he left Frick with clear instructions: cut wages and don't negotiate with the union. Frick did exactly that. He offered the workers an insulting new contract with a major wage cut, a take-it-or-leave-it deal he knew they would reject. When they did, he locked them out of the mill, which he had already turned into a fortress with sniper towers and barbed wire. His plan was to reopen the mill with non-union replacement workers. To protect the plant, Frick hired 300 armed agents from the Pinkerton Detective Agency. On the night of July 5, 1892, the Pinkertons were towed up the river on barges. But the townspeople were waiting. As the Pinkertons tried to land, gunfire erupted. The battle raged for 12 hours. By the time it was over, at least 3 Pinkertons and 7 workers were dead. The violence at Homestead was a national scandal. The governor of Pennsylvania sent in the state militia to crush the strike. The union was broken, its power shattered for decades. From his castle in Scotland, Carnegie cabled Frick his full support. Though he publicly acted shocked and regretful, his private letters revealed he approved of Frick's actions. The man who called himself a friend of the working man was exposed. His reputation was permanently stained. The Homestead Strike revealed the brutal foundation upon which his great fortune and his future philanthropy was built. It was a stark reminder that the money he would use to build libraries and promote peace was forged in a conflict that cost men their livelihoods and their lives. Long before he sold his company, Andrew Carnegie was already wrestling with the morality of his enormous wealth. In 1868, at just 33, he wrote a private memo to himself, promising to cap his income and devote the rest of his life to doing good. This was the seed of a philosophy that would define his second act. He laid out this philosophy in 1889 in an essay that became famously known as The Gospel of Wealth. The essay was a radical challenge to the Gilded Age. Its main point was both simple and revolutionary. It is the duty of the wealthy to use their surplus fortunes during their lifetime for the good of humanity. Carnegie argued that there were only three things you could do with great wealth. First, leaving it to your family, he called a foolish mistake, arguing that inherited fortunes were often wasted. Second, leaving it for public use after you die was also not good enough. This led to his most dramatic conclusion, and the essay's most famous line, "The man who dies thus rich dies disgraced." The only noble option, he argued, was the third, to give away your wealth while you're still alive. The millionaire, he said, should be a mere trustee for the poor, tasked with distributing his fortune in a way that does the most good for the community. But this wasn't a call for simple handouts. Carnegie hated what he called indiscriminate almsgiving. Just giving money to the poor, he believed, was a waste and encouraged dependency. Instead, he said the goal was to create ladders upon which the aspiring can rise. This meant investing in institutions like libraries, universities, and museums that would empower the industrious and ambitious to help themselves. His philosophy was a strange mix of the era's social Darwinism and a genuine sense of duty. He believed that the same skills that allowed men like him to get rich also made them the best people to decide how to give that money away for the public good. He called on the wealthy to live modestly, provide for their families, and use the rest as a trust fund for society. This gospel was debated across the world. Some praised it as a new vision for charity, while others blasted it as a self-serving excuse for the massive inequality created by capitalism. Either way, he had thrown down the gauntlet to his fellow tycoons. It sparked a wave of large-scale strategic giving and created the intellectual framework for the modern foundation. For Carnegie, it was more than an essay. It was the blueprint for the rest of his life. Armed with his gospel and a nearly limitless fortune, Andrew Carnegie began a philanthropic mission on a scale the world had never seen. Over the last 18 years of his life, he systematically gave away about $350 million, nearly 90% of his wealth. This wasn't charity as people knew it. It was a strategic, global investment in human progress. The cornerstone of his giving was the public library. Remembering his own life-changing experience in Colonel Anderson's small collection, Carnegie believed free access to books was the ultimate ladder for self-improvement. Between 1883 and 1919, he spent nearly $60 million to build 2,509 libraries across the English-speaking world, with 1,689 in the United States alone. These Carnegie libraries became the bedrock of America's public library system, putting knowledge within reach of ordinary people. His second great passion was education. He gave tens of millions to universities and founded new ones. His most famous legacy is Carnegie Mellon University, which he started as a trade school in Pittsburgh for the children of his steelworkers. He also established the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, which created the first pension system for college professors. But his giving went far beyond libraries and schools. A devoted pacifist, he spent millions trying to achieve world peace. Establishing the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in 1910, he created the Carnegie Hero Fund to give awards to civilians who risked their lives saving others. In his beloved hometown in Scotland, he donated public baths and a huge park. He funded the construction of 7,000 church organs, believing music was an uplifting force. And in New York City, he built the iconic Carnegie Hall. He approached this mission with the same methodical focus he used in business. He didn't just write checks. He created professional foundations and trust to manage the money and make sure it was used effectively. This shifted philanthropy from a personal hobby to a structured, professional, and perpetual job. He inspired other tycoons, most notably John D. Rockefeller, to follow his lead, kicking off the golden age of American philanthropy. Carnegie wasn't just giving his money away. He was creating a whole new model for how wealth could serve society. As he got older, Andrew Carnegie had a strange problem. He couldn't give his money away fast enough. To solve this and to make sure his work would continue long after he was gone, he made his final and perhaps greatest move. In 1911, he established the Carnegie Corporation of New York, putting $135 million into it, the largest single philanthropic trust ever created at that time. Its mission was simple and broad: to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding. This gave the foundation the freedom to adapt to the needs of future generations. By the time he died in 1919, he had given away over $350 million. The roughly $30 million that remained was transferred to the corporation. The Carnegie family, following the patriarch's lead, did not become a dynasty of wealth. Andrew had one daughter, Margaret, who lived a relatively quiet life. She and her children honored his wishes, letting the vast fortune remain dedicated to public service through the foundations he had created. The rags to riches to rags story was complete. The family chose a legacy of giving over a dynasty of wealth. Today, that legacy is everywhere. The Carnegie Corporation remains one of the world's most influential foundations. Carnegie Mellon University is a global leader in technology and the arts. Thousands of Carnegie libraries, many still open, stand as monuments to his belief in free knowledge. And his core idea that great wealth comes with great responsibility has become a guiding principle of modern philanthropy, influencing everyone from the Rockefellers to Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. His legacy is complicated. The same man who funded peace palaces could crush a union with brutal force. The capitalist who suppressed wages also funded institutions to uplift the very workers he underpaid. But this contradiction is the central lesson of his life. Andrew Carnegie showed that the same ruthless drive used to build an empire could be turned into a powerful engine for social good. He created a blueprint, however flawed, for turning private wealth into public progress. A blueprint that continues to shape our world today. If you found this look into the Carnegie legacy fascinating, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the figures who shaped our history. And let us know in the comments, what do you think is the most important part of Andrew Carnegie's legacy? From a damp cottage in Scotland to the pinnacle of global wealth, Andrew Carnegie's life was the American dream made real. He arrived with nothing and built an empire that redefined the very scale of business. But that incredible rise is only the first half of the story. His real revolution wasn't in steel, but in an idea. By declaring that a man who dies rich dies disgraced, he challenged the very meaning of success. He transformed philanthropy from a rich man's hobby into a solemn duty, a systematic mission to better humankind. He didn't just give away his money, he invested it in the tools of opportunity. The libraries, universities, and institutions designed to help others climb the ladder just as he had. His is a legacy of stark contrasts. The ruthless industrialist and the generous philanthropist, the strikebreaker and the peace advocate. Yet, through it all runs a single powerful belief that a life is measured not by what you gather, but by what you give back. Andrew Carnegie built an empire, and then, in a far more radical act, he gave it all away, leaving behind a fortune not in dollars, but in the countless lives touched by his unprecedented generosity.